5 simple words reached Tehran from Pyongyang, landing like a geopolitical thunderbolt. We stand ready to assist. Now, if you caught that message in passing, you might dismiss it as standard diplomatic theater, just another instance of allied nations expressing solidarity or taking a symbolic jab at Western powers. But here's what makes this different, what makes intelligence analysts around the globe stop dead in their tracks. Those 5 words aren't empty posturing. They represent the public acknowledgement of something that's been developing in the shadows for over 40 years, a military partnership so concerning that it's kept security experts awake at night for decades. Think about it this way. When two of the world's most heavily sanctioned nations, both with advanced weapons programs, both facing similar adversaries, suddenly bring their cooperation out into the open during a moment of extreme regional tension, that's not just news. That's a potential inflection point in modern security dynamics. North Korea and Iran haven't just been casual diplomatic partners exchanging pleasantries at international forums. For more than 4 decades, these two governments have been constructing one of the most troubling military alliances in contemporary global affairs. Their collaboration has extended across an astonishing range of domains. We're talking about missile engineering and development, weapons component manufacturing and transfer, military technology sharing programs, and sophisticated cyber warfare operations. Intelligence communities have spent years tracking suspicious flows of technical knowledge between these nations, knowledge that pushes both countries closer to weapons capabilities that most governments refuse to acknowledge publicly because the implications are simply too disturbing. The vast majority of this cooperation has deliberately stayed beneath the radar, conducted through covert shipping networks, secret scientific exchanges, and deliberately obscured communication channels specifically designed to evade international oversight and sanctions enforcement. What transforms Kim Jong-un's statement from routine diplomatic noise into something genuinely alarming is the timing and the context. He's choosing to publicize this shadow relationship precisely when regional tensions have reached dangerously high levels, when the situation could escalate dramatically with very little warning. The immediate concern among security professionals isn't merely that North Korea might offer Iran political support or diplomatic backing at the United Nations. The real worry cuts much deeper. What if Pyongyang is signaling genuine willingness to provide tangible, actionable assistance? What if we're talking about technical expertise that took North Korea decades to develop, advanced weapon systems that could alter battlefield dynamics, or intelligence cooperation that could expose vulnerabilities in defensive systems? Even the mere possibility of such support is sufficient to trigger emergency planning sessions inside military command centers across multiple allied nations. To genuinely understand why those 5 words created such immediate alarm throughout the intelligence community, you need to understand the historical foundation of the North Korea-Iran partnership. This alliance has roots that stretch back through decades of cooperation, through periods when both nations were desperately isolated and searching for partners willing to defy international pressure. The relationship actually began during one of the most brutal conflicts of the late 20th century, the Iran-Iraq War, a devastating military confrontation that consumed both nations and left hundreds of thousands dead. During that dark period, Iran found itself in a desperately isolated position on the world stage. International sanctions had been imposed, diplomatic pressure was mounting from multiple directions, and political hostility meant that traditional arms suppliers were completely off limits. Yet Iran was literally fighting for its survival against Saddam Hussein's military forces, which were receiving substantial support and advanced equipment from several foreign governments simultaneously. Desperate for weapon systems capable of countering Iraq's growing military advantage, Iranian officials began reaching out to countries that were willing to ignore international pressure and provide what Tehran desperately needed: North Korea emerged as one of the very few nations prepared to fill that critical gap in Iran's defense capabilities. Pyongyang made the strategic decision to begin supplying Iran with Scud based ballistic missiles and other critical military hardware during a period when virtually no other government was willing to provide Tehran with anything resembling advanced weapon systems. These weren't just simple commercial transactions that happened once and ended. They marked the actual beginning of a strategic military relationship that would quietly expand and deepen through the decades that followed, long after the immediate crisis of the Iran Iraq War had ended. Instead of the relationship gradually fading away once the immediate crisis was resolved, something unexpected happened. It deepened dramatically and expanded into something far more sophisticated and strategically significant than simple wartime arms dealing. Throughout the entire decade of the 1990s, North Korean engineers and specialized missile technicians traveled regularly to Iran, often spending extended periods helping develop the country's indigenous ballistic missile program from the ground up. The absolute crown jewel of this extensive cooperation was the transfer of critical technology related to North Korea's Nodong medium range ballistic missile, which subsequently became the essential foundation for Iran's Shahab 3 missile system. Now, let that reality sink in for a moment and consider what it actually means. One of the single most important weapons in Iran's current military arsenal, the missile system that gives Tehran the operational ability to threaten targets across the entire Middle East region, exists in its current operational form specifically because of North Korean technology and hands on expertise. This isn't wild speculation from conspiracy theorists or unverified claims from questionable sources. It has been documented extensively and repeatedly by United Nations panels of experts, independent weapons researchers working for respected institutions, and intelligence agencies from multiple countries who have studied this relationship for decades. The Shahab 3 and its subsequent improved variants are essentially the direct descendants of North Korean missile engineering, adapted and refined over years by Iranian scientists and engineers, but fundamentally born from original blueprints and technical knowledge that originated in Pyongyang's weapons development facilities. The cooperation between these two nations didn't stop with the Shahab 3 program, and this is precisely where the story starts to become genuinely alarming for anyone seriously paying attention to global security. Now, let's talk specifically about what North Korea could actually provide to Iran in the current moment, because the phrase, "we are ready to help," only carries real weight if there's genuine substance behind it. And here's the uncomfortable truth that security analysts have to confront. Pyongyang has a considerable amount of substance to offer, more than most people realize. The most obvious category of potential assistance is ballistic missile technology. And we're not just talking about the older legacy systems that formed the basis of their historical cooperation decades ago. North Korea has made genuinely dramatic advances in its missile program in recent years that have surprised even experienced analysts. Successfully testing intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching the continental United States, developing solid fuel rocket technology that makes missiles significantly faster to deploy and substantially harder to detect before launch, and reportedly making meaningful progress on hypersonic glide vehicles that could potentially evade existing missile defense systems that cost billions of dollars to develop. But ballistic missiles are just one component of what makes this partnership so genuinely dangerous to regional and global stability. And arguably, they aren't even the most concerning element when you look at the full picture. North Korea has methodically developed one of the most capable and strategically aggressive cyber warfare programs on the entire planet, operating through sophisticated groups like Lazarus and its various specialized subunits to conduct operations that have genuinely stunned the international cybersecurity community. These are the same people who were behind the devastating 2014 Sony Pictures hack that exposed massive amounts of confidential data, the WannaCry ransomware attack that crippled hospitals and businesses across dozens of countries simultaneously in 2017, and the systematic theft of billions of dollars in cryptocurrency that directly funds North Korea's ongoing weapons programs. If North Korea were to actively share cyber warfare tools, advanced techniques, or even experienced personnel with Iran, which already possesses its own considerable and growing cyber capabilities, the combined threat could be absolutely devastating to critical infrastructure. Imagine carefully coordinated cyber attacks simultaneously hitting military communication networks, international financial systems, electrical power grids, or even municipal water treatment facilities launched at the exact same moment as physical kinetic military operations unfold on the ground. That kind of nightmare scenario might sound like something straight out of a Hollywood thriller movie, but security experts repeatedly warn it's a very real possibility that keeps them up at night. But the issue that genuinely worries intelligence officials the most, the one that shifts this entire conversation from a serious regional security problem to a potential global crisis of historic proportions, is nuclear technology and knowledge transfer. North Korea has already conducted 6 confirmed nuclear weapons tests and is widely believed by intelligence agencies to possess enough weapons grade fissile material to construct dozens of functional nuclear warheads. Over the years, spanning decades, its scientists and engineers have developed the highly complex technical expertise required to miniaturize nuclear devices, sufficiently so they can be mounted on ballistic missiles, an extraordinarily difficult process that took decades of intensive research and engineering work to accomplish successfully. That specialized knowledge represents some of the most sensitive and tightly protected weapons technology anywhere in the world. Meanwhile, Iran has continued systematically advancing various elements of its nuclear program despite years of intensive international negotiations specifically aimed at limiting its progress toward weapons capability. Iranian nuclear facilities have enriched uranium to levels that many independent experts say go far beyond what is typically required for legitimate civilian energy production purposes. At the same time, the country actively maintains extensive research infrastructure and considerable technical expertise that, if redirected toward weapons development, could theoretically support the development of functional nuclear weapons within a compressed time frame. This dangerous combination of expanding nuclear knowledge and a potential deepening partnership with a country that already possesses operational nuclear warheads is precisely what keeps many intelligence leaders deeply concerned about how far this cooperation could ultimately go if left unchecked. The absolute nightmare scenario that has genuinely haunted non-proliferation experts for years is a significant transfer of critical nuclear weapons knowledge from North Korea directly to Iran, not necessarily a complete functional warhead that could be immediately deployed, but rather the specific technical insights, engineering solutions, and practical knowledge that would allow Iran to cross the nuclear threshold far more quickly than its own independent program would otherwise permit. Whether Kim Jong-un would actually cross that extremely dangerous line is one of the most consequential questions in global security today, and his very public declaration of readiness to help Iran has forced that question from the purely theoretical realm into the terrifyingly practical domain. Washington's public response to Kim Jong un's statement has been carefully measured and deliberately restrained, but reportedly extraordinarily intense behind closed doors where the real strategic discussions happen. American intelligence agencies are undoubtedly scrambling right now to comprehensively assess whether North Korea's offer represents genuine intent to substantially increase support to Iran, or is primarily a calculated rhetorical move designed to complicate American strategic calculations and stretch resources thinner. Tel Aviv's reaction has been particularly intense and focused because Israel has long viewed the North Korea-Iran axis as one of the most serious long-term strategic threats to its very security and survival. And the very real possibility that North Korea could now significantly accelerate its support for Iran during a period when Israeli forces are actively targeting Iranian military infrastructure across multiple locations introduces a genuinely troubling strategic dynamic that complicates military planning. Concerns about this deepening relationship are definitely not limited to governments in the Middle East region. Governments across Europe are also watching these developments with increasing anxiety and growing alarm. If North Korean missile technology were to help Iran develop significantly longer range delivery systems beyond what they currently possess, the possibility that Iranian missiles could eventually reach major European cities becomes a serious strategic consideration that defense planners must account for. For many European governments still adjusting to this new security reality, the idea of simultaneously confronting a prolonged war in Eastern Europe that continues draining resources while also preparing for a growing ballistic missile threat from the Middle East that requires entirely different defensive systems would stretch defense capabilities that for decades operated under relatively low military investment. The question of whether Kim Jong-un is primarily bluffing to gain strategic advantages or genuinely preparing to act with concrete assistance is one that absolutely defies simple answers, because North Korean strategy has consistently involved carefully calculated elements of both posturing designed for external audiences and genuine willingness to take dramatic action when leadership believes it serves their interests. What makes the present moment particularly dangerous from a strategic stability perspective is not just one single dramatic development, but rather the concerning convergence of several destabilizing forces happening at the same time. Rising regional conflict that could spread, expanding military operations across multiple theaters, advancing cyber capabilities being weaponized, ongoing missile technology transfers between sanctioned states, and persistent nuclear tensions are all intersecting in ways that could potentially amplify each other in unpredictable ways. If you found this analysis valuable and it gave you a deeper understanding of what's really at stake here, share this video with someone who needs this perspective. These are the kinds of complex security issues that don't get enough serious attention in soundbite-driven media coverage. Leave a comment and let me know what aspect of this relationship concerns you most. Is it the missile technology transfers, the cyber cooperation, the nuclear dimension, or something else entirely? And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel because we'll be following this story closely as it develops. The relationship between North Korea and Iran isn't going anywhere. It's been building for over 40 years and shows every sign of continuing to evolve in ways that will demand our attention for years to come.